You are listening to Big Trouble in Little Podcast. And here are your hosts, Joe Dubs and Andy.
Hello, Internet peeps, and welcome to another edition of Big Trouble Little Podcast, episode 68. I am Joe Dubs.
And I'm Andy.
And we are starting our new ranking. We already did Planet of the Apes. We are doing Star Trek now. The old Star Trek with Captain Kirk and, Spock and Bones and all those good people. But before we get into that, Andy, what the hell have you been watching?
Some Japanese stuff. Last week I watched a ton of stuff, but this week I didn't as much. I watched. It's really hard to describe. The second movie in like an epic from Japan, The Human Condition.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on a novel, or it's either a novel. It's like a series of 6 novels or something like that, and it's real heavy, and it's about a guy who's kind of I guess he's a socialist. He's kind of a pacifist in a way, and again, it's just hard to talk about. It's a classic in Japanese movies, and I watched the second one, and each movie is like famously long. This one was 3 hours and a minute long. But I thought, hey, I saw Endgame, so fuck it, I'll watch this movie. And it was, of course, great. And it ended on like a crazy, interesting, like, oh my god, cliffhanger. So now I gotta watch the next one soon, I hope. I watched the first movie. Speaking of Japanese movies that come in series, I watched the first movie in a series of 5 that is popularly known, and I thought about this watching the series, and then I looked it up, and sure enough, it was right. Popularly known as like the Godfather of Japan. Battles Without Honor and Humanity. It's a series of 5 movies based on Yakuza's memoirs that he was writing while he was in prison in the 70s, and they were published as articles, and they made these movies about him. And the first movie was very cool. It's like really fast. It's hard to keep track of, but it reminds me of Godfather a lot, except it's a little hammier. Like when a guy dies, there's like a big band sting, and it's like, oh, this guy died on the stage or whatever. Okay. But it's interesting because there's even like a scene where they're arguing about whether to sell drugs and stuff like that, and just like in Godfather, and it's about the families, the different Yakuza families, like they're at peace, but they're not, and there's fights, and then fighting breaks out, and they're all really violent. And it's like everyone, people get shot every once in a while, but also every once in a while, someone has a sword, which is pretty cool. It starts around Hiroshima in 1946, which, as you can imagine, is a super turbulent time in Japanese history. And apparently, like, I own it on Blu-ray. It's from Arrow Films, but it's on Amazon Prime apparently, so I highly recommend it. I've been telling people about it, and I think a couple of my friends are going to watch it. So same to the viewers. It's a Yakuza movie. It's like up until this point in Japanese history, Yakuza movies had been like, it had always been they were portrayed as like not Robin Hoods, but kind of like heroes. They were like gallant and stuff, and it like reflected like a romanticized version of Japanese history. But then these movies came out and showed like the actual, like, how bad it is. And as the title implies, Battles Without Honor and Humanity, it's just like they're real shitty and violent, and it's just no good. And a lot of people get killed and backstabbed and stuff. And I mean, it's a cool series. And then I also went to the theater and saw Godzilla King of Monsters, and that was a cool experience because I went with 3 friends, and we were the only ones in the theater, which sucks for that movie, but man, it was cool.
Yeah, and I saw it too, and we will be discussing this after we do Star Trek, so keep an eye out for now playing Godzilla King of Monsters. On me, on the other hand, I did a little bit more TV than movies, but I did see 2 movies, which is Godzilla King of the Monsters and then Toy Story, You Got a Friend, Me. Just because Toy Story 4 is coming out, and I'm just going to watch all 3 before I see the 4th one. Because I want to refresh my mind of all the sad scenes before I cry again in Toy Story 4. But I did watch Black Mirror's new season. I believe it's season 5. It had like 3 episodes, and I just want to say I'm really disappointed in this season. I think they put all their eggs in one basket in the Bandersnatch thing that they made.
This was season 5 already. I thought this was like season 2.
No, they've had multiple seasons, and they don't have like a set list. Like whatever they want to do and make. Like last season, I believe was 5 episodes. I think the longest season was season 2 with 6,
Okay.
and then season 5 was with 3. But usually, every episode has like a Twilight Zone kind of twist to it, and usually Black Mirror has like a somber ending because it talks about the technology and how it's taken over human like social stuff and all that stuff, and then just it's bad. Like the post-apocalyptic stuff where machines are taking over. It's a good watch. It's like the modern day Twilight Zone, not the one with Jordan Peele, but Cory Booker.
Which is literally the modern day Twilight Zone, I guess.
Yeah, which is on CBS Access for $9.99, I think. Then I saw Lost again. I watched a couple of episodes because I had the itch of watching Lost, one of my favorite shows of all time. And then Dark, season 1, which is a German TV show on Netflix about time traveling, murder, and mystery, and all that stuff. Season 2 is coming out. So if you want to check out this show, it's on Netflix. It's really, really good. It's German. I'm not really big on the whole subtitles thing when it comes to TV shows, but I digged it. People were telling me to go watch it because I'm so into time travel stuff in movies. So they're like, "Here, watch this," and I was like, "Oh shit, it's amazing." So go see it. It's on Netflix. Watch it now. Which, by the way, did you notice they raised the price on Netflix again?
No, did they? They sent me an email that said they were going to, but I didn't know if it had happened yet.
Yeah, it went from like $11 to $15 now.
Oh, mine went from 9 to something. I don't know.
It's in the teens now. All right, I think we're gonna get into our ranking of the Star Trek movies. First, we're gonna start off with Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Right off the bat, I want to say, did you see the TV show?
No, not really.
Because I feel like they alluded to a lot of. I mean, they did do the nostalgia of each character, like George Takei's character, Kirk, Spock, and all that stuff. They had their moments, kind of like when Star Wars does it when they like show their old characters. But I feel like I should have watched the season or the series finale of the TV show to kind of know what happened to Kirk at the end, because there's a whole new like remodel of the Enterprise, and I felt like I was missing something. I don't know if you had the same feeling.
I mean, not really. I understand the original Star Trek. It was a serialized space adventure. It didn't have a whole lot of like linear plot stuff from what I understand. Again, I haven't seen it. I've seen every episode of Next Generation, but the original series I just haven't really gotten around to. It doesn't interest me as much, but I would still like to see it eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand what each character does. I know who Uhura is. I know who Scotty is.
Chekhov.
I know who Chekhov, Sulu, Bones McCoy, Spock and Kirk. I already know all those characters. I know their traits. I know their jobs on the Enterprise, and I know a lot of like the broad strokes of some of the stories. I know what tribbles are. I know what Klingons are. I know there's lots of crazy stuff happens in space. So yeah, I still get it. Like at the beginning of this movie, I don't know. I was always able to keep up. I guess I get it.
Mm-hmm. And what I found really surprising is they had the alleged child molester, Stephen Collins, the guy from Seventh Heaven, as Decker in it.
Oh, I didn't know all that. I didn't even know the actor's name.
Yeah. You ever see Seventh Heaven?
No, is that a TV show?
Yeah, it's a TV show that was on the WB and then before it turned to CW.
Oh.
Yeah, I used to watch it before school, usually the school or after school. I think it was after school more. But I was like, hey, that's the guy from Seventh Heaven. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so but Captain Kirk, by the way, was he an admiral? Did I hear?
Yeah, at the beginning he's an admiral. They dress him as admiral, and
Yeah.
he wants to get back on the ship. Like that's part of the plot. That's part of like the his story arc is he wants to get back on the Enterprise. He doesn't want to be an admiral. He wants to be out there doing stuff. He wants his ship back.
Mm-hmm.
He's in love with that ship. He wants. He gets on there and he stop competing with me, Decker, and he's like, oh, you're competing with him, Jim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did like the. I thought the chemistry with Kirk and Decker was pretty good. There is, and I just want to put this right off the bat. I just want to say, like, the camera work in this movie was pretty good. I would have to. I would even say, and this is a bold statement, that it's kind of I digged it more than Star Wars on the camera work. But then again, like, they did more models and stuff. I feel like this one was more of a stage, and
Star Wars was like a special effects big deal, and this movie has some awesome killer effects in it, like when that probe is on the bridge and stuff. Just the way it's shot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how they did it, but whatever. It looks really cool. But yeah, you're right. It's more the director who did this had previously done like some other sci-fi stuff, so he'd got to build up more of his technique, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's not a slight against George Lucas. He still tells a perfectly competent story, but a lot of his movies, it's just like it lets the action speak for it. He's not a cinematographer kind of director.
Yeah, because every shot I was like, because here's the thing. I know the TV shows. Like, the TV show was kind of, we all know TV shows have a less budget than a movie. But I was going into this being like, because I never seen any of the movies, I was going in being like, this might look cheesy, and it didn't.
No, yeah, this movie had a big budget. This was a big deal. They had originally, obviously, they made 2 seasons of the original Star Trek, and eventually there was an animated series or something like that. But it did okay, did pretty well. But then in syndication, it got like really popular, like it blew up, and they were like, "Well, we got to do more with Star Trek." And they were working on. If I was a bigger Trekkie, if I knew more about Star Trek, I'd be able to walk you through it a little bit better. But it was like there was going to be a movie, and then they said, "Well, let's just do a season 3 of the TV show." So they started developing the characters of like Ilea and Decker and a couple other things, and then I think what happened is Star Wars: A New Hope happened, and they were like, "Well, shit, we should just make a movie."
Mm-hmm.
That's where the money is now. We'll make a summer blockbuster. We're gonna own the summer of 1979. I assume it came out in the summer. I don't even know if that's true, but instead of making it like action packed, Star Wars is science fantasy. A lot of people don't really make the distinction, but it is. It's more out there. Star Trek is more science fiction. It's grounded. It's the future, but technology kind of makes sense.
Came out in the winter.
Went for more of like a 2001 feel to it, because there are several scenes in this movie that feel right out of 2001, because it's all slow and deliberate, and it's in space, and the soundtrack is like serene but tense. That sounded stupid and contradictory, but I think people get what I'm trying to say. So they did that, and the movie was an okay success.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't break records.
I'm looking at it. It came out in the winter, December 9th, 1979. Their budget was $35 million. In the USA, they made $82,258,000, but about $82,300,000. pretty much. And worldwide, they made about 139 million.
So yeah, that's a success.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it was a success. It was good enough that they made several more.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was real impressed with it because when I was watching, when I was starting to watch this, I was like, oh, this might be a little rough to get through.
I really want to talk about the first scene with the Klingon. It's not the birds of prey. It's like the larger vessel. It's like really slow.
Mm-hmm.
That's the scene you're talking about, like where they're flying up on them and they're talking in Klingon, so there's subtitles.
Yeah.
The first scene in this movie would be such a turnoff to someone expecting Star Wars. And I don't know why they made that choice, but it really does set the tone for the rest of the movie. And I fucking love that scene. I love how those Klingon ships look. They look like real weathered and like real, for lack of a better term. I love the music. The score in this entire movie is great.
Mm-hmm.
Just put that out there right now. But I love that first scene. But if anyone ever said they hated that first scene, I'd say, yeah, you're right. That first scene is awful. It's just, I love it. Those models look great. And I guess this is the first appearance of Klingons looking that way. I don't know if that's true or not, but Klingons in the original series didn't have the crazy elaborate makeup that we know from Next Generation. So I think this movie is the first time that was used. Again, if I was a bigger Trekkie, I would know. I always mean before we do these episodes to try to like research stuff a little bit more, but you could research Star Trek for the next year and not know everything about it. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I researched kind of the twist of this movie, which we'll get down the road in a few. But did you have in the beginning of this movie? Was there like a couple of minutes where it's just blank screen? By the way,
I
with music.
Remember. Yes, I think so. Yeah, because it shows the logo, and that's kind of it for a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, that sounds right.
It was on Amazon Prime, and I turned it on, and then all of a sudden it was like black screen for at least a minute and a half, and I was like, "Oh God, is it broken?" But
I
then
don't know if it was that long for me or not.
I don't know, it felt long, and then I fast forward to obviously the Klingon part, which I thought was amazing. I'm with you on that one.
Okay, good.
The only thing I really want to say that was kind of a turnoff, but I knew why they did it, is when Scotty and Kirk are like traveling to the Enterprise, and it literally
that little shuttle.
it literally took forever.
They milk that way too long, and it's cool because it's like, oh man, yeah, the Enterprise, and then it's like, yeah, that's the Enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
and then like the music keeps like sweeping up and up and up, and eventually you're like, oh come on, Jesus Christ, this movie's 2.5 hours. This is why.
Yeah, they do a couple of scenes where it's like that when they obviously when they go into the weird blue cloud. Like I understand they were trying to make it suspenseful.
That I understand a little bit more because it's like the unknown. Like what every time they're going further into V'ger, it's more like this is mysterious. Everything I'm seeing for the first time. But and I've never been to a dry dock in low Earth orbit where a Constellation class starship is being retrofitted, obviously. But it's more like you get a couple good looks at it and you get it.
Mm-hmm.
But the inside of V'ger, it's like it's all like really great special effects and matte paintings and stuff like that. So there's a time to use these long scenes and to let the soundtrack breathe, and they just do it for too long in some places, and that is the worst offender. But there's a few other places I'd argue where, okay, I get it. Come on, movie, let's fucking get on with it.
I want to really say that William Shatner, did I say his name right? William Shatner. There you go. Shatner. Really good in the movies. I felt like in the TV show he was like overdoing it, probably because it was his, first things he's done as like a big actor, I guess.
He honed his acting chops on T.J. Hooker, I guess. I never watched it.
Mm-hmm. But he was really good. Leonard Nimoy. I can't fucking say his name. Spock, the guy who plays Spock. Leonard Nimoy.
Leonard Nimoy.
Nimoy, there we go.
There's something really weird about Star Trek movies, and that's that a lot of the actors who play these sci-fi characters also have weird sci-fi names. Deep Space Nine is the worst about that. But anyway,
Yeah, George Takei was good. The guy who plays Bones is really good. Uh, the acting, some of it was kind of lame a little bit, but not too terrible.
at times, like I always expect, and like William Shatner has this reputation for not being a great actor, but he's really, really trying in this movie, and he does a great job. And there's several times where, like, if you take it by itself, it seems like he's not being a good actor. But I wish I could remember the exact line. They're on the bridge, and it's after they've already talked about Decker like fighting him on stuff, and he's like, Decker, you're exactly right, or something like that. I can't remember what he says, but I really like the way it's delivered, and I don't know, he has a way of using his the cadence of his speech to act, which is of course the meme, but I think it works. I like his interactions with pretty much everyone he interacts with. In
Hmm.
a nutshell, Leonard Nimoy has to spend half the movie being like an emotionless, because he's on Vulcan, and they're like, "Oh, you've successfully beaten all emotion out of you. You're a pure logic machine." And they're about to like, "You've done it. You're one of us." And oh, hang on, wait. And then something's calling out to me out there in space. So he's got to be a weirdo for half the movie, which is kind of a shame, but it still leads to all those really cool, um, like you expect them to see each other and like, oh, I'm so glad to see you, and they fucking bump fists and high five and shit. But you don't get any of that. You gotta wait till the end of the movie.
Yeah, and I will say, like, when Kirk is yelling at Decker on the bridge, like, I feel like that's more genuine because he's like, I'm the captain here. Who the fuck do you think you are? And then, logic comes into sense, and matureness and his leadership comes in. He's like, yeah, you're right. But then when he, brings him into the corridor, he's like, yo, what the fuck you doing? And then he does it again, where, why did you, what was that scene? Something about, oh yeah, phasers to torpedoes and stuff. He's like, why did you cancel my phaser order? And he's like, and he's like, oh yeah, that's logical. Now I understand.
And he like tells him, and he's like, "Oh," you can tell he's like a little deflated in a way. Then you were exactly right, of course. And he like turns away immediately.
Hmm.
That's like really good blocking and really good. Like that scene is shot so cleverly because it's just the three of them. It's just Decker, Kirk, and Bones in a room, and they're talking. And he says, "Why did you do this?" And like Bones is off to the side, and they're saying it. And he says, "Well, you don't understand. On the new ship, the phasers are tied into the warp drive. If you fired the phasers, or they wouldn't have worked because the warp drive was engaged." He says, science nonsense. He says, "Oh, you were absolutely correct then." And he like turns away and faces the wall, and then Bones gets closer to him, and it kind of like advances the scene a little bit, which then leads to stop competing with me. And then he leaves, and then Bones is like, "You're the one who's competing. You need to quit being a dick." And he's like, "I'll tell you when I'll stop being a dick, you asshole." And then Bones leaves, and those doors close, and they're like the real dark glass, and it just like frames Kirk perfectly in the center of the scene,
Hmm.
or the center of the shot, and those doors close, and it's like the oh, it's so cool. I like that part a lot.
Yeah,
That scene's got that's to your point of like this movie shot really cleverly. Like you can tell that there was thought given into, okay, well, two characters have to have a conversation, but something interesting has to happen in the scene instead of two idiots dressed in all white yelling at each other. They tell the story with body language and again blocking, to use that term again. It's really
yeah.
cool.
And people that are new to Star Trek, because I watched The Next Generation, and I did watch a couple of like episodes in the first ever Star Trek TV show.
You've probably seen more of it than I have then.
Yeah, like Star Trek is more politics than action. Star Wars is more of the, I got lightsabers, and then eventually in the prequels they get a little more political, which is probably the worst idea they ever made. But I digress. Um, Star Trek is more of, we're gonna talk about this before we, get into a war kind of thing. But when they do fight, it's really the tension is high. Like you feel what's going on in the bridge. Like we need to go into warp speed. We need to hit them with phasers, bring up the shields and stuff. That's why I want to get the VR game.
Me too. But here's an interesting fact about this movie. Again, consider the fact that this came out just a few years after Star Wars. They don't fire phasers a single time in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
They fire photon torpedoes once.
At
There's
an
no
asteroid.
conflict in this movie. Yeah, at an inanimate object. There's
Mm.
no conflict in this movie. It's all grade A science Star Trek bullshit. And I love it.
Yep. Trying to think what else I think. Scotty didn't have a lot of roles in this film besides saying that ship is pretty good condition, sir. We're trying to get
All the supporting characters take a back seat in this. Chekhov, Uhura, Sulu. They're in it, but barely.
Oh, the one bad acting I'll give is when Chekhov gets burnt by the green lightning, where he just screams really loud. I don't know.
I really like in the one scene where they're like photon torpedoes. It sounds funny. It makes me smile.
Oh yeah, the wormhole. The wormhole thing was funny because all the time is different in wormholes and everything.
Yeah, but it's because they've got they want so much of the plot to focus on Decker and Ilea, which is fine. They're both really interesting characters, and I think they're both well acted.
Mm-hmm.
But it's you can tell, like when I heard for the first time that those characters were leftovers from when this was going to be a season 3 and they were going to have those characters, I said that makes perfect sense, because immediately you can tell there was supposed to be more to these characters. They still do a really good job in 2.5 hours getting across the fact that they had a relationship and he left and she was upset about it, but they still love each other. And where the movie takes that is really interesting. So it's cool. It's still a good job that they did what they did, but you can tell. And so I guess it's for better that they put the other characters to the side and deal with the new characters. And of course we keep the trilogy of great characters of Kirk, Spock, and Bones.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows Kirk and Spock, but Bones has always been my favorite.
I just love that Bones comes on the bridge just to see what's going on, and then when he sees weird shit, he just leaves.
Yeah, he's a doctor. What's he supposed to be doing? No one's injured yet.
It's like he's bored and being in the medical bay, and he's just like.
Well, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when they like draft him and like you're going on board the Enterprise, and they beam him up, and he's like. And his stupid like disco outfit or whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
and he's got like a medallion in his chest hair and a beard, and he's just all pissed off. I love that scene.
And
he's
then
like he's upset. He's they drafted me, Jim, and you did this. This is your fault.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite. Him and Scotty are my favorite.
Scotty got to be in that whole scene where they're flying to the ship for an hour and a half.
Yeah, but he shines when he's saying that. I can't give it any more power, Captain. This one he was just like, yeah, the engines are not doing that great.
Yeah, seriously, you guys need to quit doing this. We need to work on the engines.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of V'ger?
The whole twist, I think, when we sent this probe out 300 years, I was like, oh, that's really good. I really like those kind of twists. But I really want to bring up to you with V'ger, is this the origin of the Borg?
That has been a popular fan theory. I knew we were going to talk about this, so I kind of refamiliarized myself with it. It's been a popular fan theory for a long time. And I don't know if I buy it. Like when someone first told me, I was like, "Oh wow, really?" And I always kind of liked it. But the more you think about it, and the more you read into it, the more you're like, "I don't know if I like this or not." Like, it would be a little bit of like a retrocon thing because obviously they developed the Borg later. But I mean, what we know of the Borg, they wouldn't have handled V'ger the way they did. It could have been the civilization from before the Borg, like before there was a hive mind or something like that found V'ger or found Voyager 6 after it had gone through the wormhole. But the Borg as we know it, they would consider it like not worth assimilating, not worth dealing with. They would just ignore it. There is another version of that fan theory, which makes a little more sense, but only barely, and it also falls apart immediately. And that is that at the end, when V'ger gets what it wants, it gets to touch the creator. The creator comes and puts in the final part of the code sequence so it can send all of its data. And Robo Idea and Decker are like, I don't know, zapped. It looks really cool. That scene's gorgeous. I don't fully understand what's happening, if I'm being honest.
It's like a light show.
Yeah, it's just a really cool light show. And then they're like, oh, we made a new life form. It gets to make its own way in the world or in the universe. There's another like sub theory that the new life form that they created went back to the other side of the universe, like where V'ger had been sent back from, and then begat the Borg because the marriage of Decker and Ilea is like half biological, half machine. But I don't like that either because like the times are thrown off. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And like the robotic version of Ilea that V'ger had created was far more complicated than anything that we see from the Borg. However long Next Generation is later, 150 years later. So that doesn't make sense either. They're both really fun theories. And I guess Gene Roddenberry himself at some point had alluded that one of them was true. But there's a lot of like creators when they're confronted with fan theories like this, they like to be like, "Oh, maybe we did that," and it's like they're thinking, "Oh shit, that's kind of good. I didn't mean to. Maybe we'll keep it. Maybe we won't. I don't know." But
Well, I go back to First Contact in the Star Trek Next Generation movies, where they're assimilating humans pretty much, and I feel like that's what V'ger was doing in a way because he's always want to collect data. And that's what a probe does, and
that's what he was programmed to do. That's what V'ger is for. It's what Voyagers were for.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like at some point this V'ger became an AI, or they use an AI for the probe, and met up with the Borg somewhere, and then I don't know. I just thought it was pretty cool in that if this is true of the origin of the Borg, I dig it. Because
it could be cool. I used to think it was really cool, and honestly, I thought completely canon the way someone had explained it to me.
mm-hmm.
But after I watched the movie this most recent time, I was just reading some stuff online about it, and someone in more than one places like explained why it didn't make sense, and someone else would be like, "But Gene Roddenberry," and then someone else would be like, "Oh, but all this." The more I read about it, the more I was like, "Oh yeah, this doesn't make that much sense." But it's a shame because it is really cool. It would be a nice like cyclical thing to the Star Trek universe. But I don't know. I mean, if you believe it, then that's your headcanon, and it's all the better for you.
The problem with TV shows is they'll take a source and they'll run with it, and then other people make other sources where it goes away from the origin story a little bit. So I don't know if it got lost in the writer's room in some way, but I feel like it would be a good origin story because how does the Borg get these like human figures? Like they're half robot and half carbon units.
Carbon units.
So I don't know. It really made me want to watch the Next Generation again though, and all the other Deep Space Nine, the newer Star Trek shows. So maybe I'll watch the Next Generation because that's my favorite. Out of every enemy in Star Trek, the Borg got my interest because don't they mess with time travel in the Next Generation?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, First Contact. That's the plot. Is the Borg go back in time near Earth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I really dig the V'ger thing. I did like the build up where it was mysterious. So like, we're collecting data. we're gonna like at some point she was like, "Oh, we're just gonna get rid of all the carbon units. We just we just want the Enterprise and the Creator at Earth." And
Well,
they're like,
they think the Enterprise is like a being, and all these carbon units are like on the Enterprise, like infesting it or something.
a virus, pretty much.
That's not what it is.
Yeah. I for some strange reason I thought they were gonna tell V'ger like, "Oh, your creator was NASA," because they were talking about NASA, who sent the Voyager out 300 years ago, and I was like, "Are they really gonna say NASA was their creator?"
I mean, yes and no.
hmm Um, Spock, I thought was really good. When he was, because it felt like he had an agenda. What was his agenda, by the way, of this power source? Because I felt
Well,
like,
he wanted to get near it because it is a machine. It's a being, a thinking being of like pure logic, and he senses that. I don't know if it called out to him or he just sensed it's because he's way the hell over on Vulcan, which is not near Earth,
hmm
but he senses, oh, I need to understand this thing. It can help me be a more perfect Klingon, because Spock was only half Klingon and he was always trying to like figure out which world he was part of, and it was always mostly he's a Vulcan. He wants to get rid of all his emotions.
yeah.
So getting to V'ger would have been a good way to do that.
hmm And then when V'ger was probing the Enterprise with that like lightning thing, I like I like how it was like zapping people, especially when they break the computer.
One of the best effects in that entire movie. I mean, that whole sequence is great. I don't know what they're doing, but it's like the motion of the camera seems weird, and I love the sound effects, like the woo, whatever it is, and the light's cool. But I love that it has been loud for so long, for several minutes, and it's zapping people, and it zaps Ilea, and then and then it's just super quiet, and that thing she was holding like drops to the floor. It's kind of startling, and I really like that part.
I thought Decker was gonna, no pun intended, deck Kirk after like Ilya got taken away.
Nah, he's classier than that. That's why he gets to say, "That's how I define unfounded."
Mm,
And it's like, oh snap!
yeah, and at times Kirk looked like he was, didn't know what the fuck was going on. He's like, should I be in this seat? Like you could tell it by the how he was looking. He was thinking that in a way, in my opinion. I mean, it might come off different to you, but it's how I read everything when it came down to him and Decker. I didn't.
I don't know. I thought he had more confidence in that. I think Kirk, for at least the first act, maybe the first two acts, he's sure that he's where he needs to be. The Enterprise is where he belongs. The consequences and other people be damned. Like he comes to Decker and he says, "I'm replacing you as captain of the Enterprise. You will be uh, the XO. You'll be the temporary commander," and something like that. He's like, "No, this is my ship. This is right." At least that's the way I interpret.
Yeah, and I really liked what they did because Spock is like, Vigor's like a child and stuff, and they're like, everybody get off the bridge. We're not gonna tell who the creator is. We're not gonna give any information, just because Vigor was acting like a child, having a tantrum and stuff.
What do you think we should do? Spank it?
Oh man, but other than that, it was pretty straightforward. It was really long to get to that point of seeing the whole space probe kind of thing. Um, oh, let's talk about Ilya when she was like a robot thing.
Yeah.
What do you think of like the memories? Like he was Decker was trying to like use her old memories to kind of like persuade her, what the fuck is going on here.
I think that would have been more poignant if we knew what their old memories were.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we'd seen them together before, or if they'd have coexisted on the ship for longer. It was still interesting. And it's like that one scene, they're like, oh, everything's everything's replicated. Right down to her eyes are even wet or something like that. And it's like, so what's the difference? He could still like put it to that robot if he wanted to, right? Is that what you're trying to say? It's just weird, but um,
Yeah.
I don't get. I guess her memories are in there somewhere. It's for the plot, I guess. I don't understand it fully, but it's so that he can. We need to try to get in with this robot so we can try to learn. And plus, it makes the ending more poignant, where he does, unite with her, and they're together forever, presumably. I guess.
Well, kinda, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, since they took Ilya and made her like a robot thing, that's why I thought the Borg theory seems logical in a way that maybe Decker is going to be like her as a robot, and they're going to be not to get too religious, but the Adam Eve of the Borg. I don't know. Maybe I'm just stretching it there.
No, like I said, that's the second version of that theory. So.
Um, totally forgot what I was gonna say, but I recommend this film.
I definitely do. This movie's a masterpiece. It's it is boring. It's hard. It's harder to recommend it now in a post all the Star Wars movies world, in a post like the Marvel movies world. It probably isn't for everyone. A lot of people, if all you want to do is watch the Fast and the Furious movies, if the movie you look forward to most this summer is that Hobbs and whatever movie, then you might not like this movie. But if you like other sci-fi movies, if you like anything Star Trek, I mean, this is required viewing. If you like the Andromeda Strain and the Quiet Earth and stuff like that, I mean, the Andromeda Strain was directed by the same guy, in fact. Then yeah, absolutely, you gotta watch this. If you like Planet of the Apes, I think this is a very good place to go.
Yep, and it didn't really, even though it's like 2 hours long, it did feel like shorter in a way. It felt like an hour and 50 minutes to me.
Yeah, if I watched that movie and didn't know the length, at the end, I'd say that movie was about 2 hours, because there are a few times when it drags on, but none of the parts where it drags on are in like the final third of the movie. The whole last third of the movie stuff is just go go go. Everything's interesting. I want to know what's going to happen. There's a lot of tension. It's well formed in that way. There's still a couple of those getting to the Enterprise themes, but they're all front loaded. They get those out of the way.
Yeah, and it came off really good. Like to me, I came with low expectations. I was like, oh, it's Star Trek. It's gonna be cheesy a little bit, but it was like a big budget film, and it was a big budget film. So I do recommend it. So let's get into the ranking. Since you already saw the Star Trek movies, where did you put it, Andy?
Well, yeah, I've already seen all 6 of them, and I'm looking for some of my opinions to change. But for now, I put it at the nice, safe number 3 slot. And again, we're only going to rank the first 6 movies, the ones starring the original cast. So that's middle high. It's this movie's great, but it's not as great, if I remember properly, as 2 of the other movies. I've already said what I think the 2 best movies are, but I'll go ahead and, just in case you're only listening to the Star Trek episodes, I'll keep you in suspense. I'm sure everyone can guess what one of them is, because it's one of the most famous sci-fi movies ever made. But yeah, I'll stick it at number 3 for now.
And I'm gonna put it at number 1 because I've never seen any of the movies. So
it's the best one you've ever seen.
Yep, so far. I mean, not counting the Next Generation movies. If that was part of the list, it would probably change a little bit.
And we'll do those one day.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's where we'll end it, because we have to get into the Godzilla podcast. Anything you working on, or are you just still the same like last week?
Yeah, same.
Yeah, me, the same thing with Nerd Review. Still working on the website. Just been dealing with a lot of, other projects, and there's going to be new announcements soon and new logos that I'm working on, by the way. I showed Andy our new logo for this podcast. He wants to change the colors and stuff, so keep an eye on that. To catch our podcast, go to novnetwork.podbean.com. We're also on I know there's no more iTunes, so I guess Apple Podcasts it's called now, and Spotify. Rest in peace, iTunes. We've known you for a really long time.
Yeah, good riddance.
There we go. On that note, everybody, next week's episode, we're doing Star Trek Wrath of Khan. I know that iconic scene, so that's why I said it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So be prepared. See that movie, come back here, and we'll talk about it. And yeah, let's watch some movies, damn it. See you guys later. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening.